Hello, I'm Hannah. Like a lot of people in the UK, I love reading. And my favourite book is this, Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is one of Britain's most popular authors. He wrote 15 novels and hundreds of short stories and newspaper articles. They have entertained both children and adults for over 170 years. And even people who haven't read them know the names of many of his characters, such as Oliver Twist, Ebenezer Scrooge, Miss Havisham, and Fagin. Today, there are many famous plays, films and musicals based on his work, and children all over the world study his books at school. But what do we know about Dickens himself? I've come to London to find out more, using a special Dickens app on my phone. Charles Dickens was born in Portsmouth in 1812. He moved to London when he was still a young boy. His family were quite poor. His father spent some time in prison for debt. So Charles left school early to work in a factory. He worked 10 hours a day, sticking labels on pots of shoe polish. Luckily, Dickens returned to education and later became a journalist, here in Fleet Street. But he didn't forget the experiences of his early life. Many of his stories are about poor people in difficult situations. In 1836, Dickens wrote his first novel, The Pickwick Papers. It was a huge success. Like most of his books, it was published in monthly instalments, and people waited eagerly for the next month's part. It sold thousands of copies, and lots of famous people read it, even Queen Victoria. This was a busy time for Dickens. He married Catherine Hogarth, and in 1837, the couple moved here to 48 Doughty Street. He wrote his second novel here. It was called Oliver Twist. Oliver is a poor orphan. He runs away to London. There, a gang of thieves, led by Fagin and Bill Sikes, take him in. But when Oliver tries to steal something, he is caught. Many bad things happen to Oliver, but in the end, he finds his family again. Charles and Catherine had 10 children. And today, their home is part of the Charles Dickens Museum. Inside, you can still see how the family lived. The rooms are decorated in the style of the time, and a lot of the family's personal possessions are here. You can see Dickens' old armchair and the sitting room his family spent their evenings in. In fact, this museum is home to one of the most important Dickens collections in the world. There are over 100,000 items on display here, including manuscripts, rare editions of his books, and paintings. Dickens moved out of this house in 1839, and he continued to be very successful. His stories like A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield and Great Expectations were very popular, and Dickens became one of the most famous authors in the world. He sold thousands of books and travelled to America and Australia, giving lectures and public readings. His stories changed the way people thought. A lot of his stories, like Oliver Twist, were about poverty. And these descriptions of life for poor people in Victorian Britain helped to improve working and social conditions. Dickens died in 1870. 55 years later, in 1925, his old house became the Charles Dickens Museum, and it has been a very popular tourist attraction ever since. Dickens is still very popular today. People all over the world read his books. It's amazing to think that he wrote some of them here, at 48 Doughty Street. You should come here sometime. Bye.
What kind of things do you like reading?
Well, I like reading fiction books. My favourite book is 1984 by George Orwell.
I like reading fictional books. They're very interesting, such as Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings. It's very different to how, obviously, life is.
I like to read adventure books, but most of the time I don't like to read.
I like reading books about crime because I want to be a lawyer when I'm older, so it interests me.
I like to read newspapers because they are interesting and they teach me about the world today.
I like reading sci-fi and fantasy novels. I read a book called Wither, which is about a girl that gets trapped in a house by a scientist and he's trying to find a cure for cancer, so he uses the girls to find out the cures and she has to escape from the house. That was a good novel. I like that book.
I like reading a wide variety of texts. So I particularly enjoy reading novels. My favourite novel would be The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I also read a lot of non-fiction. I read about modern history. And I also read magazines. For example, I read National Geographic magazine. I also read some sports magazines.
I like reading newspapers, magazines and books. I really enjoy Sherlock Holmes, especially after the TV series Sherlock that has recently been on television.
Where and when do you read?
I like to read in the car, on a journey, or in the living room in the afternoon.
Everywhere, all the time. I read quite a lot in bed before I go to sleep, and then whenever I have a free time at school and when I'm not working.
I read mostly at night when I have nothing else to do and I'm bored.
I have a fairly long bus journey to and from school every day, so I read then and also at home.
I usually read in the morning, usually when I'm having breakfast.
I read in the evenings in bed before I sleep, or on the bus on my way to school, or on the train if I go to London.
I have many places where I read. Some of my favourite places to read are in a park or by the sea because it's very peaceful. It's a very private place. I also like reading just before I go to sleep at night because it helps me to relax last thing in the evening.
I read whenever I can, whether it's in school time, whether it's at lunch, whether I'm at home, just wherever I can.